All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to open up by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Hakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who were well and preached his truth and sincerity. Shalom to the hopeful elect. And this is the brother Amawan Ayash from the GMS Indianapolis camp coming back at you with another quick lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. And in today's lesson, I have an article from the New York Post. And it reads, Trump warns a very bad future if NATO allies refuse to help open a critical Strait of Hormuz. And we know that pretty much, man, with this conflict that's going on, a lot's going on, really, with this conflict that's going on, pretty much, man, we're in World War III. All right, and it's only a matter of time till it's in full effect. You see, as we see, the conflict is growing on a day-to-day basis, right? It's only a matter of time till all these other nations get involved, Russia, China, right, so on and so forth. And we know that within end time prophecy, that the NATO and EU nations will be, which EU stands for European Union, right? They will be amongst the list of nations who will ultimately use their missiles, right, to lay waste the land of Babylon the Great, aka America. So just based off this headline alone, we can see that, everything that we're seeing take place in the planet Earth is ultimately moving towards prophecy being fulfilled. You see? So I'm going to go ahead and open up. We always get the scripture, all right, and bring it out numerous times. But, hey, this is what we're seeing right at this current point in time, you see? And as it is, man, we can never bring it out enough. Matthew 24:6, this is our Lord Yahweh Shai speaking in the red letter. And ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Verse 7 is the point. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. You see, America, all right, is having its NATO and EU allies, right, getting ready to turn themselves on America, right, and be completely contrary against America. Right, and what we're seeing wars and rumors of wars as we speak. You see, once again, this conflict, we're currently, right, or pretty much, man, we're in World War III, because we understand that what's going on with the U.S., Israel and Iran, ultimately it's all linking up with prophecy, man. Israel being the start of all this, right? The scriptures talk about how the least of the flock shall draw them out. The state of Israel going to be responsible for drawing America and all these other countries into the final world war. You see? And in end time prophecy, all right, these NATO and EU nations, right, the NATO and EU allies of America will turn against America and shoot their missiles on this place, man. You see, along with the other nations, right? It says there should be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrow. So, hey, man, we are currently seeing a divide, right, between America and its allies, man. You see? And prophecy tells us in the book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 7, it says, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee, which also means confederacy, that's pretty much being in league with. Let's go ahead and look that up, actually, in the blue letter. It says, Barayath. It says covenant, alliance, pledge between men, treaty, alliance, league. So what the nations that are in league, right, with America. Right, let's read that from the top again. Obadiah 1 and 7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. And what we know that in this conflict, right, in this coming world war, right, World War III, that ultimately, right, those who were once in league with America, all right, when they take their bows, right, aim their bows and shoot those arrows being missiles, ultimately we know that according to prophecy, right, these nations, right, are going to be successful in having their missiles, right, destroy the land of America, which ultimately, all right, this is really the Lord. This is the Lord's movie. You see, so the Lord is using these nations, right, to shoot their missiles, right, against America and completely lay this land waste. You see, so also, man, these are the Lord's missiles, really. Because what the Lord said in Isaiah 54, right? And verse 16, it says, "Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire." You see, so ultimately it's the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai who's created that nuclear scientist and given that nuclear scientist the wisdom to be able to come up with these nuclear weapons, man. You see, so once again, all credit goes to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. You see, these are the Lord's missiles, right? The scripture talk about what the Lord hath opened forth, hath opened his armory to bring forth the weapons of his indignation, right? So these missiles that the Lord is arming these armies with, man, these are the Lord's missiles, man. You see, as the Lord has created the nuclear scientists and giving him the wisdom to be able to come up with these missiles, to create these missiles. You see, this is the Lord's work, man. It says, "And that bringeth forth an instrument for his work, I have created the waster to destroy." And we know that these missiles are being created and prepared for a certain purpose, right? And that's what? To destroy the lands of America and the land of Israel, right? The lands of America and Israel. All right. Difference is what America is going to be completely laid waste and never built back up ever again. Right. But we know what the Holy Land, our land, is going to be cleansed by this nuclear fire. And in our kingdom, right, when we have the heathens in subjection, right, beginning with Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, and within that, beginning with Amalek, all right, the so-called Ish people, all right, they're going to build up our kingdom, as it says in Isaiah, the 60th chapter, right? "The sons of strangers shall build up thy walls," right? So back to Obadiah 1:7. It says, "All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee had deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him." So you see these nations, who once, partook in deals with you, right? And were in league with you. Ultimately, right, the time is coming where the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is going to put the spirit upon them to turn against you and shoot their missiles at you, man. So, hey, man, the writing is on the wall, and it's over for America, man. All right, everything we're seeing take place in the planet Earth, man, is all leading about to the end of this place, man. Right? Let's go ahead and jump to the article. Once again, the headline reads, "Trump warns a very bad future if NATO allies refuse to help open critical Strait of Hormuz." It says, President Trump on Sunday warned NATO faces a very bad future if the U.S. allies fail to help reopen the crucial Strait of Hormuz as oil prices soar during the Iran war. Trump said in an interview with the Financial Times that European nations and other global powers that rely on Gulf oil should join a U.S.-led effort to secure the waterway. You see, and as this devil is trying to get these other nations to, join them in their cause, right? Everybody is seeing, right, America for the piece of shit that it really is. All right, as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and get this real quick. In the book of Nahum, the 3rd chapter, and I'll start at 5. The point is in 6. It says, "Behold, I am against thee, said the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai of hosts, and I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will show the nations thy nakedness, and the kingdoms thy shame." You see, so ultimately all the nations are seeing America for what it truly is. All the nations are seeing America for the piece of shit that it truly is, man. Okay, verse 6, "And I will cast abominable filth upon thee and make thee vile and will set thee as a gazing stock." All right, let's look into that word gazing stock real quick, which I believe the word there should be spectacle. Yep, it says looking, appearance, seeing, sight. It says seeing, appearance, it says sight, spectacle. You see, so now the Lord has made it to where ultimately all the nations, right, they see that America really ain't shit, man. America trying to spread its philosophies and doctrines and wicked ways of life across the four corners of the planet Earth, man. Trying to pollute other nations with their wickedness. You see, waging all this war, right? Exacting all this violence in other lands, which we know at the head of this are the Amalekites, right? Your Ish people. You see, let's read that in the NLT. Verse 6, "I will cover you with filth and show the world how vile you really are. And the scriptures talk about what the Lord said, right, in Jeremiah 49, that he has made Esau bare. All right, he can't hide himself. You see? So, hey, man, Esau's shame is being seen. And going back to the point I was making, how, as we read in the article, all right, it says that Trump said in an interview with the Financial Times that European nations and other global powers that rely on Gulf oil should join a U.S.-led effort to secure the waterway. Well, hey, man, these NATO and EU nations, man, all right, they're currently, what we're seeing right now, they're at odds with America, man. You see? So they're basically, their mindset is like, you know what, man, fuck that, man. You know? America's this big-ass piece of shit nation, right? Committing all this bullshit on the planet Earth. We ain't gonna help them. You know, thus leading to what? Revelation, the 17th chapter, right? These shall hate the whore, roughly paraphrasing, right? Which we'll get that. Lord's will. It says, where roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply normally flows. It's only appropriate that people who are the beneficiaries of the Strait will help to make sure that nothing bad happens there, Trump told the British outlet, arguing that Europe and China are more heavily dependent on oil from the region than the U.S. It says if there is no response, or if it's a negative response, I think it will be a very bad Slovakia. I think it would be very bad for the future of NATO. It says the president also said he could delay his summit with China's president Xi Jinping later this month as he presses Beijing to help unblock the Strait. You see, and nobody's going to come to the aid of America, man. You see, let me get this real quick, because the Lord is breaking this place up, man. I think it's Jeremiah 50. Yeah, the point is in 22, but I'm just skimming through a little bit. Yep, this is Jeremiah chapter 50 and verse 23. It says, how is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How has Babylon become a desolation among the nations? And we know that ultimately Babylon is going to become a desolation among the nations, right? When the Lord puts the spirit upon these nations, right, to shoot these missiles over here, man, and lay this land completely waste. But as it says, how is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder? So, the Lord, Yahweh Bashmi Awashai, right, is ultimately taking down, right, the power of America. And like it says in Isaiah 47, right, come and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. You see, so the Lord is completely casting this place down, man. You see, that's going to be the effect, right, of this conflict that's currently going on. We know it's also going to blow up into that final world war, right, the third war that Scripture speaks about, right, World War III, the Battle of Hormuz, you know. And ultimately, once again, the end result of that is what? America is going to be destroyed. All right, and I actually thought about this. Let's go back to the book of Obadiah. And chapter 1 and verse 2. And this is referring to Edom, right? When you read up in verse 1, it says that Obadiah 1 and 1, the vision of Obadiah, thus said the Lord Yahweh Bashmi Awashai concerning Edom, we have heard a rumor. You see, so this is concerning Edom, right? The so-called white people today, so-called white race today. You see, and we know that what Edom is also synonymous with America. All right, Isaiah 63 and 1, who is this that cometh with Edom, right? Who is this that cometh from Edom with thy garments from Basra? All right, but we know that what the book of Obadiah is prophecy against the nation of Edom, right? It says, we have heard a rumor from the Lord, Yahweh Bashmi Awashai, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Verse 2, here's the point. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised, man. So ultimately, America is despised, right, in the eyes of the heathen. You know, Edom is despised in the eyes of the heathen. You know, and this is why none of these countries are getting ready to come to the aid of America. You see? And, we know China, right, they're in league with Russia. So, as we just read, the president also said he could delay his summit with China's president Xi Jinping later this month as he presses Beijing to help unblock the Strait. China's not going to come to your aid, man. You know? China's on the side of Russia, Iran, you know? So they're not coming to the aid of America. It says, I think China should help too because China gets 90% of its oil from the Straits, Trump told the Financial Times. And we was going into it a bit earlier, right? America and Israel, they the only ones that's banned, right, from being able to use the Strait of Hormuz. You see, so going to show you once again, back in the book of Obadiah, all right, the Lord has made these devils small among the heathen and greatly despised, man. It says, we like to know before that it's 2 weeks. Excuse me. We like to know before that it's 2 weeks is a long time. We may delay, he said, without elaborating on how long. It says, Iran said on Saturday, you see, and we just said that. You know, we were just going over this earlier, right? In our Bible class earlier, right? It says Iran said on Saturday that all countries other than the U.S. and Israel may pass through the waterway in a desperate attempt at coalition, busting less than a day after America bombed military targets on Iran's oil critical Karg Island. You see, so ultimately it's the U.S. and Israel who have been banned, right, from passing through the Strait of Hormuz. All right, once again, right, the Lord has made these devils, right, small among the heathen, and Edom is greatly despised among the heathen. You see? It says international oil prices surged to roughly $106 a barrel on Sunday, skyrocketing by about 45% since the conflict in the Middle East escalated. Trump said the 32-member North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, should provide military support ranging, what the hell just happened? It says, here it is, ranging from minesweepers to forces that can knock out bad actors along the Iranian shore. We have a thing called NATO, he told the Financial Times. We've been very sweet. We didn't have to help them with Ukraine. Ukraine is thousands of miles away from us, but we helped them. It says, now we'll see if they help us. Trump continued, because I've long said that we'll be there for them, but they won't be there for us. And I'm not sure that they be there. You see, because ultimately we know what the stage is being set, right, for the NATO and EU nations to turn against this place. You see? As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and get that right now. In the book of Revelation, the 17th chapter, and verse 16, it says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, which the 10 horns, right, in Revelation, the 17th chapter, are representative of the European Union, right, the EU nations. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And what we know the time is coming that what the NATO and EU nations will turn their backs, right, against America, right, and shoot their missiles at this place. You see, and, hey, that's what's going to happen in World War III. You know, all these nations are going to take up their bows and shoot their arrows and bomb this place with those ICBM nuclear missiles, man. You see, so there's nobody coming to the aid of Israel and America in these last days, man. You know, this is going to be a league of all these nations, right, against Israel and America, right, shooting their missiles over at these places, man. You know, and we know what, that these lands are going to be completely laid waste and desolate. You know, Israel's going to be built back up. America will not. You see? So jumping back into the article, it says, the president also singled out his frustration with the UK after speaking to Britain's Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, earlier on Sunday, that Allah reported. The UK might be considered the number one ally, the longest serving, etc. When I asked for them to come, they didn't want to come, Trump said. So even the UK, right, Britain is against this place. Let's get this. What is it? Jeremiah 50. This is Jeremiah chapter 50 and verse 12. It says, your mother shall be sore confounded. She that bare you shall be ashamed. And also, who bore or bear America? All right, UK, Britain. All right, we know that what America once started off right as the 13 colonies, right? But they once, in history, right, they liberated themselves, right, from the UK, and now we have today what we know is what the 50 states, man, are the United States of America. It says, she that bear you shall be ashamed. Behold, the hindermost of the nation shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. And that's the fate of America, Babylon the Great, aka America. You see, so ultimately, even right, the UK, right, Britain is going to be against this place, man. You know. So reading on, it says, and as soon as we basically wiped out the danger capacity from Iran, they said, oh, well, we'll send 2 ships. And I said, we need these ships before we win. Not after we win, he added. I've long said that Nato is a one-way street, Trump said, claiming that Iran's military capabilities have been largely decimated in the past 2 weeks of fighting and will pose little danger to European allies moving assets to the Gulf. A French soldier was killed in an Iranian drone strike in Iraq on Thursday. Trump also signaled that the U.S. was prepared to launch new strikes that could target oil infrastructure on Karg Island, the loading site for most of the Islamic Republic's oil exports. It says, you saw we hit Karg Island, everything but the pipes yesterday, Trump said, referencing the total obliteration of military targets on the island about 16 miles off the Iranian coast. We can hit that in 5 minutes, and there's not a thing they can do about it, he said. So what the pride of this devil is on display, man. You see, what they don't realize is that, the writing is on the wall, and the downfall of America, all right, is what's slated, man. It's what's written. And there's nothing that they can do about it. You see? So as you can see, that's the end of the article. Let's go ahead and get a couple more scriptures. Let's get this in the book of Proverbs, the 21st chapter, and verse 1. It says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will. And that word heart goes into the Hebrew word la, meaning your mind. So the Lord is in control of the minds of these kings. And the reason why I brought this out is because, as you see in the article, right, Trump is trying to get aid, right, from other nations, right, to, as the article said, Salakia. Trump is trying to get aid from other nations to help unblock the Strait, right, so that America and Israel can get access to the Strait of Hormuz again. Well, guess what? The Lord, he's controlling the minds of the kings of these nations to be like, nah, we ain't coming to your aid. Y'all done exacted all this violence and all this evil on the planet Earth, man. Why would we help you? You see? And we know that ultimately it's going to get to the point where, hey, these nations are going to straight up shoot their missiles at this place, man. So I'll leave you with this in the book of Isaiah 13 and verse 4, because we know that ultimately everything that's going on is building up to that ultimate, right, huge and final conflict, man. World War III. Isaiah 13 and 4, the noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord, Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai of hosts, mustereth the battle. So what? It's the Lord, Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, that's gathering these, all these nations, right, the armies of these nations to the final battle, being what? World War III. And we know the purpose of this is that, according to Zephaniah 3 and 8, right, the Lord said, he's going to pour upon them his indignation, right? Joel 3. All right, we know that the Lord, he's going to gather these nations to the valley of Yahweh Shaphat, right? And he's going to judge the heathen. All right, so this is what we're getting ready to see come to pass, man. Right? Verse 5, they come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord Yahweh, B'Shem Yahushai, and the weapons of his indignation. You see, so once again, already knowing that the Lord is in control of this. All right, this is the Lord's movie. right? Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, man, when all is said and done, these missiles, man, they belong to the Lord. You know, as you read in Isaiah 54, what the Lord created the nuclear scientists, right, and gave the nuclear scientists the wisdom to create these missiles, that the Lord's will may be fulfilled. And the will of the Lord, Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, is for this whore to be burned with fire, man. This whore being America. You see, it says, in the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land of what? Babylon the Great, aka America. Right, going back up to the top of this chapter, it talks about the burden of Babylon, which is talking about Babylon in a prophetic sense, which we know, right, to be America today. You see? So I'm going to close out right there. I pray that this lesson was edifying, informative, and alarming to the elect body of the nation of Israel. And without further ado, I would like to close out by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem HaKadosh. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who were well and preach the truth and sincerity. Shalom to the hopefully elect. Lord, I'll see you in the next lesson. Till then, I say shalom.